everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Friday before Thanksgiving. Glad you can be with us this overcast, dreary November day. Glad you're all with us. My name is Ashley Jones. I'm the Managing Director of Community Programs here at the Venture Center. And Lift the Rock is typically always about economic development, showcasing resources here within the state that can help you if you're an entrepreneur, while also showcasing the stories of local entrepreneurs. And today we're giving you a jam-packed session. We've got Michael Pakko, who's Chief Economist and State Economic Forecaster, who's going to talk to us about a little bit of a retail overview, but also really looking at the data of what Arkansas taxes and sales taxes are showing us here within the state and how that compares nationally. He's going to go through that. And then we're also going to have a panel discussion with some local retailers here from Central Arkansas. We've got Abbi Siler, who's the owner of Abbi's Teas and Things. We've got Leah Lent, who's co-owner and store manager of Wordsworth Bookstore. Heather Smith, who should be here or joining us shortly, who's the owner of Domestic, and Allie Weaver, who's the director of Essie Purse Museum. I want to give a quick shout out before we dive into it. Thanks to our sponsors, Wright Lindsay Jennings, Frost Simmons, and the Little Rock Regional Chamber. Thank you so much for supporting our programs and everything we do throughout the year, and specifically Lift the Rock, drawing attention to entrepreneurship across the state and here specifically in Central Arkansas. So today's discussion, as I mentioned, is all about discussing the retail sales here in the state of Arkansas, but also how that compares nationally, and then having a discussion with 4 local retailers here in Central Arkansas to talk us through how their businesses have been impacted, what the future looks like, maybe some advice for other entrepreneurs that find themselves in similar situations, and just how they've been able to keep the doors open and still serve their customers in this time. So I want to go ahead and start with Michael Pakko, who I said is the Chief Economist and State Economic Forecaster here. And so, Michael, I want to start with you. If you want to go ahead and share your screen, I want you to take the next 20, 30 minutes to talk about your role within the state, and then present to us your data that you've collected on the metrics related to retail sales. So I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ashley. It's really kind of fortuitous circumstances that I come to be here. Ashley had contacted Dean Wayland here at the School of Business at UA Little Rock, looking for an economist to speak on this topic. And just that very morning, I had made a presentation to the dean about the work I've been doing tracking consumer spending during the pandemic. So I have some slides that I would like to share with you to kind of show you what I've been working on to track what's been going on with the consumer sector. Let me start off with some forecasts as they've evolved over the course of this unusual year. Here we have the initial forecast from way back in February, which we'll call the baseline, which was relatively uninteresting. We expected to see personal consumption expenditures, or PCE as economists call it, grow at about a 3% rate this year, and maybe a little bit faster in 2021. But of course, the pandemic changed things dramatically, and by April, the forecast looked considerably different. We were expecting to see about almost a 10% decline by the second quarter of this year in personal consumption expenditures, which is somewhat broader measure than retail sales. It includes things like housing and utilities that aren't in the retail sector. But nevertheless, it's a gauge of consumer spending. And at the time in April, we expected that to bounce back somewhat, but still be down nearly 5% from the previous year by the end of 2020. By May, it looked even worse. 15% decline in the second quarter, bouncing back to only a loss of 8% by the end of the year. Now, as it turns out, things didn't look as bad as they did in May. The actual second quarter results indicate at least about an 11% decline in consumer spending, and that we've seen a sharp rebound in the third quarter, and we expect it to be down only about 1% by the time we get to the end of the year. So you might think about that as a kind of holiday forecast, is that down 0.9% from the previous fourth quarter of 2019. But before you take any of this too seriously, let me compare the latest forecast with the US forecast. So here we have the US in blue, Arkansas in red. And one thing you'll note is that the Arkansas forecast is really nothing more than a reflection of the US data and the US forecast for that matter. And there's really no way for us to even check whether or not that's a correct view of what's going on, because the data on personal consumption expenditures come out only once per year. So there's never a breakdown quarter by quarter what's happening. This is just kind of a guesstimate as to how Arkansas is being reflected in the nationwide trends. This also shows US retail sales figures that shows a similar decline in the second quarter, a slightly sharper rebound, well, quite a bit sharper rebound in the third quarter, and expected return to some sort of normal path coming up in 2021. Now, the problem is we don't have measures for retail sales for Arkansas either. So what we do have, however, is sales tax collections, which in some sense can allow us to back out what the sales figures were initially by just dividing by the tax rate. That allows us to calculate what the original purchase price was. And if we add all that up for the state, calculate it out, we get something that I've used for several years to track consumer spending called, we call it Arkansas taxable sales, because it's derived from the sales tax figures. And if we incorporate information from gasoline taxes, we can even add gasoline into the mix and make it look more like a retail measure. And here is a comparison of US retail sales and this Arkansas taxable sales, including expenditures on gasoline. And one thing to note is that while retail sales in April nationwide declined by over 20% compared to the February levels, it doesn't look like we experienced that much of a decline in Arkansas. As a matter of fact, we saw a downturn in March that was similar to the nationwide decline. But by April, we had already started seeing a rebound in retail sales. And then we exceeded the national levels, at least relative to where we were in February, throughout the summer. The last observation here is in September, I believe. Now, as I said, the problem really is that there's no accurate retail sales data on the state level at all. This Arkansas taxable sales measure that I just showed you is not a perfect measure. It includes some business-to-business transactions. It also has exemptions for groceries and electricity expenses at manufacturers, things like that. So we wanted to look more closely at specifically what the consumer was doing, what retail sector looked like, and found a rather large set of data that was available from the Department of Finance and Administration that had all the county sales tax information with a breakdown by county and by sector every month. So that was a lot of data we collected, we harvested, put it all in a database, crunched the numbers, and what we ended up with is what we hope is a fairly accurate representation of retail sales for Arkansas on a relatively similar basis to the official census measure of retail sales that comes out from the US. And here's what we found. Total retail trade and food services, which is all the retail sectors plus restaurants and bars, compared the US and Arkansas. Here we see pretty much the same picture as we did with the more general Arkansas taxable sales. There was a downturn in March, a little bit of a recovery in April, while the rest of the country was continuing to go into steep declines. And so rather than that 20% decline that we see nationwide, it was really only about 4 or 5% here in Arkansas. And the striking thing about this, this diagram is the rather large surge that we saw in spending over the summer months, far exceeding and running in advance of the consumer spending recovery that we've seen across the rest of the country. Now, it's not that some sectors weren't affected. Here we can break it down by particular three-digit code sectors. Here's food services and drinking places. So this is bars and restaurants. And here we do see the effects of the economic shutdown, but nothing compared to the magnitude of nationwide trends. Over 50% decline in spending at bars and restaurants in April compared to February nationwide, but here in Arkansas it amounted to about 24%. So less than half the magnitude of decline in that particular sector. If we look at, there we go, motor vehicles and parts, this is an interesting one. Here we see the sharp decline in March as people slowed down their automobile purchases, but there was a huge increase in April. So it's almost as if as soon as those stimulus checks started arriving, people went out and started the down payments on a new vehicle. So it indicates a level of pent-up demand and availability of resources, it would seem. And again, that's been sustained over time. And this has been one of the sectors that has really supported the state's revenues throughout this pandemic, is rather strong sales tax collections, and particularly on motor vehicles. Here's another one that, here's my favorite, building materials, garden equipment, and supplies. Evidently that with people spending more time at home, there was a large demand for do-it-yourself projects and supplies. And that was true for the nation as a whole. We didn't see very much of a downturn in March and April at all. But here in Arkansas, we saw a 20, 30, 40% increase over previous year's spending on these types of goods, on these types of stores. So that here again, consumer spending far exceeded the pace of the nationwide trends. Food and beverage stores. Here's groceries and liquor stores, I suppose. And here we see an interesting pattern, that big spike in March, which we see nationwide and here in Arkansas. That's people rushing out to buy toilet paper. And then that dropped off a little bit in April and bounced back in Arkansas here, particularly in May, and has come down to more normal levels, but still about 10% higher than before. So there's a certain amount of sustained substitution between the restaurant sales that we saw earlier and the grocery store sales that we're seeing here. Non-store retailers, this one tells an interesting story, because this includes the sector 4541, which is catalog and internet sales. And two big features about this is, one, we see this huge increase in July of 2019. Now that corresponds to the change in the sales tax regime, the laws that required out-of-state vendors to remit sales tax receipts for sales made in Arkansas. So it's not really an increase in retail sales, but an increase in the tax collection on those sales that were taking place anyway. But that here in this particular narrow sector that primarily includes internet sales outlets, we saw about 100% increase in mid-2019. Then after normalizing things to the second half of 2020, though, we still see a huge increase in these internet sales in Arkansas, far more than the rest of the country. It's certainly been a popular way to shop in the presence of some restrictions on brick and mortar shopping. Nationwide, it's up about 20% from the previous year, but here in Arkansas, 50, 60% peaks in spending in the particular non-store retailers. Now, the increase in retail sales, or in tax receipts that we saw in July of 2019, as I said, that's a change in the tax regime, not really in retail sales. Overall, that translated to an increase in sales tax collections, what we're estimating at about 4 to 5%. So that means that even if retail spending had been unchanged throughout the whole course of the past year and a half, the state, counties, and municipalities would have experienced about a 4 or 5% increase in sales tax receipts because of the change in the regime. Here's another one, gasoline stations, where we've seen a sharp decline. And this one's kind of a unique case because, for one thing, we've seen a sharper decline here in Arkansas than the rest of the nation. In part, that's because we depend more on driving and gasoline here in Arkansas than in other states. We spend more on automobiles and gasoline than in many other states. And so that what's really reflected here, however, is the decline in gasoline prices. Of course, there's fewer miles being driven, there's fewer places to go, but the decline in prices has really driven this decline in consumer spending in this sector. And that's one source of available purchasing power that people can spend on those do-it-yourself projects or buying out the toilet paper at the grocery store. So it frees up some resources when people need to spend less on their transportation expenses. Now, all in all, if we net out gasoline and automobiles, which were two of the more volatile sectors, and ones, for that matter, that we don't have very good readings on at the county level, here's what we get for a measure called total retail sales and food services less automobiles and gasoline. And this probably closely corresponds to the sales tax base of counties and municipalities around the state. But by this measure, you see there was absolutely no decline in spending in March and April. And the distinctive feature about this graph is, again, the 10 to 15% increase in sales in these particular retail sectors over the course of this late spring and through the summer. Now, if we look at kind of around the state, there are geographic differences in where the sales have been the strongest. Here we see for March and April. So this was at the sharpest point of the downturn nationwide, and for that matter in Arkansas too. And we had a range of some counties were actually down from the previous year. Others were in very low negative territory. Remember, anything below 4 or 5% really means a decline in retail sales because of that change in regime. But here, the green counties are those that grew excessively well during the midst of what we had with this shutdown. The redder counties are those that suffered relatively small increases or even slight declines. If we look at the next pair of months, May and June, the patterns are kind of similar, but we see a lot more green here. There were increases in the range of 25 to 30% compared to the previous year in some of these counties around the state. And while it's not really clear if there's any distinctive pattern here, it does seem to indicate that metropolitan and urban counties suffered, had smaller increases in their sales than more rural areas. And that seems to be the pattern if we look at other indicators like employment or unemployment as well. As a matter of fact, if we break things down into metro and non-metro counties, or and to the right here, mostly urban, mostly rural, or completely rural counties, there are significant differences that in the March-April period, the metro and urban counties grew only about 2.8%, close to 3%. But remember, that's actually a decline compared to the 5% boost we should have gotten from the internet sales tax collections. Whereas non-metro, rural, and completely rural counties, two different ways of measuring things, grew far faster, both during the supposed downturn in March and April and during the stronger months subsequently. Now, why is all this happening? It seems rather surprising given that we're in a state of reduced economic activity. We still have capacity constraints. We're over some of the shutdowns, but there's still a lot of slack in the retail sector, that's for sure. And income is down. People are unemployed. This is a measure of personal income less transfer receipts. So it's all sources of income, including wages and salaries and benefits, includes dividends, interest, rent, and proprietor's income. And basically, it's down about 6.5% compared to the first quarter, so a rather sharp decline in the second quarter of this year. However, if we include transfer receipts, which includes both the general Medicare, Social Security, unemployment insurance, it also includes the stimulus payments and the boosted federal subsidy to unemployment insurance. And what we actually saw was about a 7% increase in personal income once you factor in those stimulus checks and unemployment insurance payments. So we were in a situation where both nationwide and here in Arkansas, consumers had a sharp increase in purchasing power due to those programs to try to combat the economic impact of the pandemic itself. So here in Arkansas, what we really had was kind of a convergence of motive, means, and opportunity to consume. Consumer spending in Arkansas was, first of all, it was distorted by the pandemic-related closures, of course. Bars and restaurants, for instance, we see there are other sectors, clothing, furniture that suffered sharp declines as well. But overall, it seems that spending was extremely resilient, surprisingly so. And it's really a convergence of factors that I think can explain this. On the one hand, the economic shutdowns that we had here were less severe than there were in other places. New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Michigan, Florida, all those places had more severe shutdowns. As a matter of fact, when we started opening up again, Arkansas wasn't on the list of economies opening up because we weren't considered to have ever completely shut down. So that provided an opportunity for consumers to continue to shop to some extent. We also had the means to continue shopping. The government transfer payments boosted overall purchasing power, and that is particularly powerful here in Arkansas because we have the lowest cost of living in the United States. It's about 14% lower than the US average. So, that $1,200 check or the $600 extra unemployment insurance went further than it would, say, in New York or San Francisco. And we still had, of course, the third factor, the motive, that spending more time at home, consumers have increased purchases associated with what economists call home production. And so that the sector on home improvement, garden supplies, home improvement supplies, shooting so far up, that's attributable there. That we've seen a shift in consumer spending patterns toward doing more things at home, eating at home rather than restaurants. And overall, however, consumer spending has been rather resilient. And so here's what I consider a more relevant forecast or outlook for retail trade. This is based on the numbers that we've actually calculated here for Arkansas and extrapolated them out given the national forecast. And what we've already seen through the third quarter that Arkansas is way outpacing the rest of the nation in recovery from the shutdowns. As a matter of fact, we never really saw a decline the way that the nation did. But given that there's little on the horizon to expect that there's going to be any sort of additional round of stimulus anytime soon, perhaps sometime in early 2021, we'll see something. But earlier we were looking at a possible stimulus package coming out before the end of this year, and that would help boost spending in the fourth quarter, but it doesn't look like that's going to materialize. So we're expecting to see a convergence back toward a more sustainable path for consumer spending into the third and fourth quarters of this year, or the fourth quarter of this year and into the beginning of next year. The table there shows the year-over-year changes on a fourth quarter to fourth quarter basis. So you can kind of interpret these as changes from one holiday season to the next, loosely speaking. And so here in Arkansas, we're actually expecting the fourth quarter to be up 5 to 6% relative to 2019. Now, whether or not consumers still have the purchasing power available from that summer spending binge is a question that I guess we'll see whether that pace of spending can be sustained. But it is expected to come down a little bit from the peaks that we saw this summer. And if we do see spending 5 to 6% higher than last year in this fourth quarter of this year, expect there to be a smaller year-over-year increase in 2022, simply due to or 2021, simply due to the fact that we still have a ways to go to get back to a more sustainable long-run level of spending. Of course, the forecast is subject to a lot more uncertainty than usual this time around, given the circumstances. Of course, a lot depends on the course of the pandemic itself, the development of vaccines, and whether or not we're going to need to go through another period of at least some level of economic shutdown is still an open question. All of those factors are going to impinge upon the consumer spending outlook, but given the current assumptions, which is that we're on the path toward gradually resuming normality sometime in 2021 and getting back on track by the end of 2022, this is the outlook that we have today. So with that, I think I will stop my screen share, and I guess I don't know if you want to provide an opportunity for questions at this point, or but I'd be perfectly happy to entertain any if you'd like.
Absolutely. We definitely want to open it up for questions. This is fascinating information. It's one thing to imagine what the numbers are in your head, but to actually see it and see what the projections are showing and what previous, data is showing. It was interesting to me, the reallocating of funds. People aren't driving as much, so let's spend a little more on toilet paper and groceries, and people making that conscious effort and decision to shift how they're using their money in this time. And the fact that personal income grew 7% for some, right, in Arkansas, the average or whatever is 7%. That's really interesting too. Some people are saying that they're spending less. They're not eating out as much. They're actually cooking meals at home, which costs less. And so it's really interesting to see this data. I do want to take a second and see if we've got any questions, and even any of our retailers. If you've got a question, as well as our audience, feel free to throw it in the chat or unmute yourself. We've got a question: are supply chain issues taken into account in these projections?
Well, supply chain issues certainly have created another mechanism of substitution that consumers have been forced to live with. I know when I go down to the grocery store, sometimes it's difficult to find a 12-ounce can of green beans, but a great big restaurant size can of 64 ounces is available. So the supply chain disruptions are creating different kinds of choices for consumers. But the interesting part about this whole exercise and trying to track what was going on with the consumer sector was really how surprisingly resilient the overall spending has been. It's been just substitution from one set of sectors to another. And it took me by surprise, and it was of particular interest because early in this pandemic, I was giving officials of finance officials at state and local and county level advice that their sales tax receipts were going to suffer 10% declines in the middle of the year. And that didn't materialize at all. So the resilience of consumer spending in Arkansas has been surprising. And I don't have good data on the other states around us, but I suspect that other states in similar circumstances are probably seeing similar kinds of patterns. And the national trends are being driven by those larger, more metropolitan centers where service sectors have been more important, and consumer spending has really been constrained.
Yes, and we've got another question. Has it been considered how these numbers might look if the big box retailers were removed from the data, Walmart, Target, Kroger, et cetera, what those numbers might look like?
Yeah, I do have a sector for other miscellaneous or general retailers. In any case, they look very much like the grocery store ones. What we see is big increases in March and May, sustained spending over time. So there's been, I think, here in Arkansas, there was actually more spending at those general merchandise stores, which includes Walmart and Target, things like that, relative to grocery stores than in the nationwide averages. I think that's because we do more of our grocery shopping at those type of stores, but the patterns are similar. So certainly, I don't have good data on breaking it down by the size of business, but the anecdotal evidence clearly suggests that smaller businesses are really being hit hard by this. The bigger chains, both in terms of restaurants and retail, are doing better at adapting to the circumstances given the resources at their disposal.
Yeah, and that's something we're actually going to talk about today with our retailers to learn how exactly they have been impacted, because we know that the big retailers will be fine. They will take a small hit, but they will not be as affected as our small businesses here locally. And so we definitely want to take a look at that. Something else that I found interesting was the map of the state. When you showed the purples and the greens and where spending and things had dropped. My eyes immediately went to Pulaski County and up near the Northwest, expecting to see green, dark green, but that wasn't the case. And as you stated, the metropolitan areas are the ones that have kind of taken the hit, as opposed to the rural areas that have actually seen an increase in spending. It makes me think of the retail sales, RV sales that have, gone through the roof. People can't travel and go abroad as they normally would. I'm looking at Mimi as I say this, but they're keeping it local, and by doing that, they go to in their RV and travel to smaller areas and Airbnbs and kind of off the beaten path. And so local smaller places and in smaller areas are seeing a little bit more business. So
yes, and as a matter of fact, the more rural, smaller towns didn't depend on the service sector as much as the urban areas. So when we had to shut down retail outlets and restaurants and bars, that had a bigger proportionate impact on the metropolitan areas than it did on the lower, less populated areas.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have a final question? Someone just made a comment. They said in their hometown, no one took it seriously, therefore business continued as usual. And that probably happened a lot more in smaller towns than in bigger metro areas as well.
Yes.
Anybody else have a final question or comment? Like I said, this information was remarkable to see, and I want to have you back, in 6 to 8 months and see how the data trends from now, because if this year has shown us anything, it's kind of expect the unexpected, and we never know what's going to happen, and so be curious to see what that looks like 6 or 7 or 8 months from now and how that's trended. Thank you so much, Michael, for being here to share that information. And you kind of alluded to the fact that small businesses have been hit much harder than big retailers. And that's what we wanted today to focus on, is the small businesses, and let their voices be heard, and let's see how their businesses have been impacted. We've got Abbi Siler, who's the owner of Abbi Teas and Things, Leah Lent, co-owner and store manager at Woodsworth Bookstore, Heather Smith, who's the owner of Domestic, and Allie Weaver, director of Essie Purse Museum. I want to turn the conversation and have a discussion with you ladies about, first I want you guys to introduce yourselves, give us an overview of who you are, your business, your role within the business, and then we'll go and ask some questions related to your business and how you've made it through. So I want to start with Abbi. Abbi, if you'll introduce yourself and let us know who you are, your business, and what you got going on there.
Sure. So my name's Abbi. I own a tea shop in Hillcrest, which is the historic area in Little Rock. I'm on Kavanaugh. I have a really good curbside situation happening. So I have chosen to keep my doors completely shut for the last 8 months. My space is built like an old, it is an old house. It was built in the 20s. So the rooms are not even more than like 10 feet. So to properly social distance is kind of a challenge for me. I only have about 6 tables in here already. So I've created Abbi's Tea Stand, which is basically, if you can imagine, a child's lemonade stand, except it's tea, and it's out on the curb, and I am out there Wednesdays and Saturdays. And then I have really grown my online business. So really leaned hard into e-commerce, and it's kind of a weird thing. My tea party room, which once hosted lovely little tea parties with little girl princesses and baby showers, now is a full-on warehouse where I package and ship all my tea blends across the US. So definitely a lot of pivots over here. And if you don't know what I sell home handmade loose leaf teas. So
awesome. And we'll get a chance to showcase that. I am, I've sent rave reviews your way. I love your tea. It's awesome. I probably have about 15 or so in my cabinet, because, variety is the spice of life. I like all different kinds. And so it's so delicious. So we'll learn a little bit more about your teas and things a little bit later, but I want to let Leah Lent introduce herself. Leah? Oh, did we lose Leah?
I think she's muted.
Yeah.
There she is.
There we go. I know, if we would only learn lip reading. Anyway, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I'm Leah Lent with Wordsworth Books up in the Heights here in Little Rock. Wordsworth has been around for 30 years, most of it in the same location. I've been part of the ownership team here for 3.5 years, so this is our 4th holiday season. Jean Cazort, the previous owner, was the one who really went through the Barnes & Noble coming, Amazon, ebooks. I mean, she hit the headwinds and she kept it going. So kudos to her, and a great customer base. So we have, we've been here and we bought an already established business. So we're a full-scale new bookstore. Do you want me to talk at all about anything else at this point?
We'll leave it there. We'll get to the other questions in just a moment. Thank you, Leah. Up next, I'd like Heather Smith to introduce herself with Domestic.
Heather, I think you're muted also.
How's that?
Voila.
Better? So I am also up in the Heights, just a few blocks away from the bookstore. Domestic features American-made goods. We're primarily a lifestyle retail shop. We try to focus on whatever you would do on the weekend, whether it's housewares or we also sell men's clothing. Just a really relaxed, unique kind of retail shop. Our biggest, I don't know, advantage maybe is that we already had a really strong online presence before the pandemic came along. So we were set up and ready to go, and we are so thankful for that. Half of our business has always been online, and at this point we're probably at about 60%. But some of that is kind of skewed since a lot of people are doing curbside, and they'll place the order online and then pick it up here in the store. So it's a bit tricky to give a specific number to that.
Great. Thanks so much, Heather. And up next, we've got Allie Weaver, the director of Essie Purse Museum. Allie, can you give us a brief introduction?
Yeah, I am the director here at Essie. We are a women's history museum told through the purse and an accessory gift store. And we've been around for going on 7 years now, and we've had to really develop our online presence much quicker than we were over the past, I guess, 7 months now. So that's kind of been the main change for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for everybody being here today. The next question is focused on, how your business has been affected. And some of you touched on this, but you can go into a little bit more detail on how your business has been affected. And, going into 2020, what was your sales model? What were you thinking? And then COVID happened and things changed. Talk about that transition a little bit. We'll go back to Abbi on that one.
Well, everything changed for me. So it's interesting in terms of sales trends for me throughout the year. So we're in peak season for me. It's tea season. It's hot tea season. People are liking to drink hot tea. So loose leaf sales, like both from like my actual bags of tea, and usually when I was open, actually having people in the shop sitting and drinking tea and having a scone, were typically like peak. These are our peak months. In the summertime, usually that's tea party season. So obviously I did not have a tea party season this year. That's birthday parties, baby showers, little girl princess parties, stuff to do to get out of the house and out of the heat. So obviously I didn't have that. And I'm honestly looking at next spring thinking I'm not going to have that same tea party season because I'm just being really careful and like keeping everything closed. That being said, I had 10 years of digital marketing experience before this. The tea shop kind of came out of a need to step away from being so digitally connected all the time. So 2020 has forced me to like get back online, but I am really grateful that I had the experience. I was able to turn around all of my inventory online within 2 days after everything shut down. And we've now shipped everywhere. I mean, Alaska, Hawaii, I'm shipping to Air Force bases overseas. So I can't be happier with the e-commerce side of things. But obviously the tea stand was definitely different. I've been through every season now. I'm coming into the cold months. Summer was really hot. But one of the ways that I was able to innovate with summer is I did these like $10 tea jugs, and they were iced teas. And those were a huge hit. Like, honestly, my little blue cooler cart has saved my business in 2020 because people just loved the tea jugs. And I've continued doing that here into the winter, but the tea jug sales have slowed down now that it's not 100 degrees outside.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Abby. Leah, talk to us about how your business has been affected. Oh, go ahead and unmute yourself, Leah.
Yes, good idea. Thank you. Like Abby, I think one of the biggest places not the biggest place we've taken a hit is on events, author events. And while author events have moved to virtual events, which are kind of nice, actually. They feel very intimate. They've been fun, but they don't sell books. And that's true across the industry. So for example, the Book Fest that recently ended here was really a fun virtual event with, 60 authors, but we sold 80% fewer books. I guess when you don't have to actually walk by the author on your way out. You don't feel compelled necessarily to purchase. However, we have then on the other side probably benefited from the home production piece. While people aren't using books to produce things, they're home, they're reading more. And we're hearing that, and our sales of individual sales actually have gone up this year. And puzzles are crazy good sellers right now. Jigsaw puzzles. So going into the Christmas season, I think probably with other retail stores that depend on traffic in December, we're all thinking, how do we keep our store down to 8 people, but we need the traffic. So we're working on campaigns to drive more online sales so that we don't have to stop people at the door at Trader Joe's. Although it might be kind of fun to be able to go. Anyway, we'll see how that's going to work. But so we've been hit on one side. We've benefited from readers.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting, and much like Abby, business in the store has ceased, but she's come up with ways to, through e-commerce, kind of build, and increase that part of the sales as well. Heather, going to go ahead and move on to you. How has domestic been affected this year?
In the store, our entire plan of action has had to change. Typically, our sales team work the floor. They like to stick with a customer. We like to demonstrate products. We like to put things in their hand. We want them to try on the shoes. And it's a very close interaction. And so retraining the entire staff to lay back. At first, it was a safety issue because we still had a lot of customers that were anti-maskers. So we put up the partitions and, just try to keep our physical distance. And then after the mandate, things became a little more comfortable, but you still don't know where customers stand. And we still want to keep our staff safe. So we've had to, there's subtle differences in how both our staff works and then how we've set up the store. We use a lot more shelf talkers and signage to try to kind of do our jobs for us. And that has been beneficial, but we're a little nervous heading into the high season because we really rely on a lot of contagious shopping where we want to fill the store, pack the store, and then let someone say, oh, what are you getting there? I need 7 of those. Oh, and there's a competitive nature when our store is really full that, you know, can double and triple our sales for the day just based on seeing what other people have. And you don't get that with online shopping. People just assume that you have unlimited supplies, and no one, you know, I mean, it's a friendly neighborhood. So people suggest what they're getting for their son or grandson, and it really helps us. So we're trying to find a way to fill that portion of our plan of attack. Another big shift that we've made is getting more obvious products, and products probably at a lower price point, products that are super easy to understand what you're supposed to do with it, whether that's decorative or even just has good packaging so that people know exactly what to do. You know, we've stocked up more on socks. You know what socks are, you know how to use a sock, you know that everybody needs a sock, that kind of thing. So they seem kind of silly, but it's easier to sell a sock to someone than sell something that you have to explain in depth.
Absolutely. We have some marketers in the chat offering suggestions on how to get that contagious customer review, talking about sharing what they buy on Facebook and tagging their friends. So you can't do it in person, but you can do it virtually. And that's where a lot of eyeballs are, as we all know. So good suggestion. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that, Heather. Last but certainly not least, Allie, tell us how Essie Purse Museum has been affected.
Well, one of the unique aspects of being a museum and a gift store is that we rely typically very heavily on visitors. And so with the change with the pandemic, we obviously we had to cancel a lot of our events, but then we also shut down and have been severely impacted by the lack or decrease rather in travel. I would say pre-pandemic, 80% of our customer base was maybe people coming from out of town and looking for something to do. So they find us as an attraction. And then, you know, you got to exit through the gift shop. So that's been a very drastic change. And we've tried to figure out different ways to still put a lot of our exhibits online, so you can have virtual exhibits and still stay out there in our able to be viewed by our customers and our guests. And so that's been probably, you know, the biggest thing that we've struggled with is just our out of town visitors. How do they still get the Essie experience without being able to actually come in the museum and see the exhibits themselves and then see the products as well? Kind of like Heather mentioned, it's been a big change because usually when people come in, we like to take them into the museum. We like to, you know, really explain things, and we've had to kind of keep our distance. Same thing goes within the store, but we have a fairly small store. So that's been a little interesting adjusting to that as well.
Absolutely. And several of you have touched on this, but want to give it a chance if anyone wasn't able to mention it. Some creative ways that you've continued to reach your customers. You got to, you know, kind of think outside of the box now. You don't have the foot traffic coming in the store, you know, as you did pre-COVID. So if anyone has any extra, you know, thoughts around that on what they've done. I know Abby's mentioned some. Let's go ahead and do reverse order. We'll start with Allie this time on creative ways to reach your customer and what you've thought about.
Well, like I mentioned, we've done some virtual exhibits, and we've spent a lot of the downtime rather when we were closed, going through our store and making sure that everything that we had was online. But we've also just really relied on our email list and social media and just kind of word of mouth. We're in Soma, and so we've invited a lot of our neighbors to come in small groups and see the museum, so that then they can tell anyone that they know that might be interested in these or in the exhibits and the things that we have. And we've just really tried to reach as many people as possible digitally. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Allie. Heather, any other creative ways you've thought about reaching your customers?
Not our customers specifically, but we use Reddit a lot. I know that's a super male dominated field, so I'm a little awkward on Reddit. But it's a great place to have actual conversations with people. And I mean, we've certainly put ourselves out there and have received not all popular feedback, but it has gotten the word out to a lot of customers free that weren't familiar with our store, and that trend continues for us. So I would suggest any message boards or forums that you can reach, especially ones that you can showcase why you're different, it is really beneficial.
That's a great idea. And Abbi wants your handle. So make sure you send that to her. She'll check you out on Reddit. Thanks for that so much, Heather. Leah, creative ways that you've been able to reach your customers.
One thing we did, I don't know if it's creative, but one thing we've done this year that we've never done before is the American Booksellers Association puts together a catalog. We've gotten a catalog in the past and we've handed it out in the store, but this year we elected to do I've forgotten the term for it, but a mailing to a zip code. Everybody gets it. There's a term for that. Anyway, so we could only afford to do one zip code, so we did the one we're in. But anyway, it was a way to maybe start reaching people who hadn't thought about us for Christmas gifts. And there was a coupon, so we're getting some folks coming in with that, which has been helpful. The other thing is, of course, like all retailers, we get people coming in and saying things like, want to get something for my uncle. He's a big reader. I don't know what to get him. What do you suggest? And so we have kind of the books in our back pocket and we ask questions and all. We have a questionnaire online for that now so that people can fill it out on a web form and send it to us. And as part of that, driving online sales, and we send back suggestions and links so they can look at the book and read reviews and things. And then we can offer, they can order online, we can wrap, we can ship, we can home deliver in Little Rock, and sort of that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Great, that's awesome, Leah. Thank you. And Abbi, I know you mentioned your tea stand. Any other creative ways you're reaching your audience and customers?
I don't know if this is creative or not, but I've really leaned into my loyal customers this year. I've done a lot of just really authentic sharing, sharing the hard stuff and the good stuff that have happened through the year, not just on my personal pages, but actually on my social media account, which was a little scary because typically you don't necessarily do that as a brand, but my brand is so much me that it's been really important to just be really vulnerable this year. And I think that that's actually really helped just drive really good loyal retention. I have become really good friends with customers that were regulars at the shop before COVID, but now have become people I really look forward to every week to see they make their tea stand their one outing every week for their kids or whatever it is. So I don't know that that's really creative by any means, but I just have tried really hard to put maybe more of myself into my brand in order to tell kind of the story that's happening with my dream little tea shop this year.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think sometimes as businesses, people forget there are humans behind the business, right? And so anything you can do to create that personal touch and affect people is really important. I think it's a great way to connect with people that are interested in your product and essentially your business. So thanks for sharing that, Abbi. I want to shift gears and focus on your products and things that you sell. I want to give you all a chance to talk about some of either your best sellers, the items that you like the best. Let's focus on what it is you sell. So we'll do again reverse order. Let's start with Abbi.
Alrighty. So I sell tea, and obviously the main product I have are typically these bags. So this is two ounces of tea, and I have over 40 different blends. So this is the cherry fig. It's loose leaf. These make really great gifts. They make really good stocking stuffers. But for the holidays, I do have my holiday blends releasing next week for Black Friday and Small Business Saturday. So this is the holiday spirit. This will be the third year doing the holiday spirit. It is a loved and cherished tea. People start asking me about it in October. People stock up and hoard it for the whole year because I only do it for the month of December. I literally do it from Black Friday to December 31st. That's the only time you can get Abbi's Holiday Spirit blend. And then I have the Twinkle Tea, which is a fun white tea. So the Holiday Spirit has lots of caffeine. This one has less caffeine. So for people who are caffeine sensitive, the Twinkle Tea is fun and it sparkles. And then, you know, I have all kinds of gifts and things at the tea stand. So teapots, teacups, tea accessories, cute little teapot cookies, which make little, you know, bonus add-ons. So I have all kinds of stuff rolling out. Next week, I'll be doing like pre-made and pre-wrapped gift bags that'll have a bag of tea, a tea ball, a teapot cookie, and just a single sample. So if you're somebody that I just want to give your tea to somebody, it's already wrapped, it's $25. You can just take it and go. So I'm trying really hard to lean into the convenience factor so that people don't linger at the tea stand too much this year. And with weather, I'm so dependent on weather. It's already looking like the forecast is going to be rainy next weekend. So I'm really bummed about that, but I'll probably be putting a lot more effort into my Cyber Monday and e-commerce sales. So.
Awesome. And I can speak for the teas. They're awesome. My favorite is probably the masala chai. I'm a big chai lover, and any of your rooibos blends, I'm a huge fan. So definitely anybody go check out Abbi's teas and get you some yummy tea. Thanks so much, Abbi. Let's move on to Leah. Some of the products that you sell.
So we books. We do have gifts, but one of the things we've been trying to do the last few years is really build the Arkansas section and to become kind of a go-to place for people who want books about Arkansas history and culture and biographies. Of course, we love for Christmas, the holidays, we love signed copies if we can get them. So some of the books we have in this category this year, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. We have signed copies of her new book, Speaking for Myself. On the other side, we have Chelsea Clinton's She Persisted series. She's done a children's series about women who've overcome obstacles to excel. This is new. Of course, Tim Ernst does beautiful, beautiful photography books. So it's a great gift and this one's brand new. He calls it his greatest hits. And I think it is. They're lovely. And then our hottest seller of the entire year, although Obama's book might give this a run, we'll see, has been The Vapors. And if you haven't heard of this, it's about hot springs. It's about the mob years. David Hill, who is a Hot Springs native, wrote it, although he lives in New York now. It has been sizzling hot. Because I think he names names. And while he wasn't able to sign the books, we did ask him to sign book plates. So we have signed book plates for this. Anyway, so these are some of the things we're really promoting for Christmas this year.
That's awesome. The Vapors, that sounds amazing and scandalous too.
The best cover ever, really.
It is nice. And I see Abbi dropped, you know, some promo codes. If anybody has promo codes or coupons or anything, feel free to throw that in the chat and speak to it. Abbi's got a promo code for folks watching Lift the Rock today. Lift the Rock at checkout, abbisteas.com. Free shipping through Sunday, November 22nd. So I wanted to make sure I called that out. Okay, also, let's go ahead and go to Heather, some items that you've got.
So what I'm going to show you today are a few great stocking stuffers, personal favorites. This is a hand warmer. So it replaces all of the disposable that you used to kind of shake to open. It's USB rechargeable, and it will stay as hot as you want it to stay for up to 9 hours. And you can also use it as a power bank should your phone go down. This is one of our best sellers year after year, and you can never have too many of these. It's $29, and it's a USB rechargeable candle lighter. And it's completely windproof. So this makes a great gift for people inside as well as anybody who does any grilling. One of my favorite larger gifts, I don't even know if I can get this in here, is this. So that is, it's called a party barge, and think of it like a Yeti cooler meets the galvanized tub that you put on your kitchen counter. So you can set up a mimosa bar or a Bloody Mary bar, or it's great for like a kid's birthday party or something like that. It doesn't sweat, so it's really desirable for anybody who does anything indoor, but it's also really great because it's insulated for outdoor.
Wait, Heather, show that.
One of my favorite things that we probably have 3 dozen left is the Santa face mask Christmas ornament. We have sold over 900 of these over the past couple of weeks, and we have not even advertised until like yesterday about them. So if you guys want any Santa Christmas ornaments to commemorate your awesome year, this is it.
That's awesome. Mimi, what did you want her to show again? You were trying to tell her to show something.
The Yeti.
Oh, the big.
It's the Revo cooler, and it's literally, and then these come out, so you could set like your garnishments or something up in there.
That's
And then-
awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Tea cocktail bar party.
There you go. With your Santa Claus face mask ornament. I love it. That's awesome. Thanks, Heather.
And something with the vodka.
Allie, what about you at Essie?
You're muted.
Oops, thank you. Our best seller so far this year has actually been this super sassy book of pop-out earrings. We've sold over 100 copies of this book, and they were out of stock, and we finally got them back in stock. So they're just really fun. There's 33 different pairs of earrings in this book and different hooks you can use. So that's just a really fun little gift that we've had. Another really good seller have been these felt bags. They're perfect for winter. They have these art panels on the front that you can unbutton and get a different panel and change it out. So you've got multiple bags in one. We've also started carrying just a lot of really fun purses, like this super cute avocado purse that is perfect for anyone who just wants a little fun bag, or to show off their style. And then of course we also have great just simple leather classic totes and other classic styles that most people are familiar with. So
That's awesome. Thanks everybody for sharing. I know a lot of people that are here are checking off some boxes on things they can get family members and friends. So I'm glad you were able to showcase that. I do want to, we're going to ask one last question and open it up for questions and any last comments, thoughts around it. But the final question is around advice or ideas. Something you've learned this year, or a piece of advice you would give budding entrepreneurs, either just beginning or those they're just looking for, a pat on the back to keep the doors open. I know this is a really hard time for small businesses. So what are your thoughts around that, Allie?
I would say the one thing that we've really learned is to stay true to yourself, but to also make sure that you can go digitally with whatever it is that you're offering. I think that if you're very prepared and you have a great online presence from the beginning, that's just a great start, and you can build on that as you go forward.
That is some really good advice. Thanks, Allie. How about you, Heather?
So for me, and this doesn't even have to be this year, but for me, the most important thing is to always have an exit plan. If this is not working, no shame. Like, but don't get in too far. Don't make your life miserable. You can only work as hard as you can work and only as smart as you can work. And without an exit plan, it's too much stress to have just that peace of mind of like, this is what I'm going to do. If everything hits the fan, can really open up your ability to stay driven and motivated. So just, and if you didn't start with one, get one now.
Thanks for that. That's really good advice as well. Leah, how about you?
I guess a couple things. One that we've kind of learned. One, I mean, besides having a robust website, which I think Allie mentioned, one is customer communication is key in these times of real uncertainty. Everybody's a little bit anxious. So the more information we can give customers about what's happening with their order, when's it going to arrive, what happens when it doesn't arrive. Anyway, or if something happens, the better. I wish we were, perfectly great on this. We're not, but we're striving to provide some certainty for our customers, and they seem to appreciate it around communications. The other is in terms of marketing, I think the local message, or whether it's services or whatever, is important. And I think our customers, it sounds like from the other retailers, are really responding to that. So for new entrepreneurs, I think who are providing services and goods here in Arkansas, it is definitely worth putting that out there and pushing the local angle.
Thanks for that, Leah. How about you, Abby?
So I don't know if it's just the proximity of my tea stand out on the curb, but I've had a lot of young entrepreneurs approach me this year. In fact, I've even gotten to showcase several of them. I have Christian, who does the macarons. I've had these girls who have started Quarren Bling, which is a little jewelry making company. And so I've put them on the curb with me, and they've had such a good time. And my biggest advice to them is never apologize for your success. The reason for that is Christian, for example, it was his first time doing an event. He baked like 200 macarons, and he was sold out in 2 hours on the first one. And these ladies came up at the very end, and they were really giving him a hard time about it. And after they left, I told him, don't apologize for your success. The fact that you sold out is telling about your product and who you are, and you don't have to say, I'm sorry for that. And so I think that's really important, especially for young entrepreneurs who really want to please people and gain that customer retention, that it's really okay for you to sell out. Like, that's a good thing. That is not something for you to be sorry for. So.
Sage and wise words from all of our retailers today. Thank you, ladies, for being with us. I was scrolling through a social media site earlier today and came across this post, and I wanted to share with everybody and kind of put a little piece at the end of it. It mentioned 6 ways to support small businesses that cost no money, and I'll add a piece at the end. You can write a positive review. You can tell your friends and family about it. Follow the businesses on social media. Engage with their posts. It is okay to interact. If they post something funny, tell them it was funny. If they post something that reminds you of a moment that happened, let them know. Give them a shout out. If you've used their products, be sure to post about it and tell other people about it. And then others sign up for their newsletter. But that doesn't pay the bills. You also have to spend money with these small businesses too. So don't forget, it's one thing to give a shout out in that and spread the word, but also kind of, put your money where your mouth is and support the small businesses that are trying to make the world a better place and put their mark on the world. So be sure to do that as well. I want to thank everybody for being a part of this discussion today. It broadened my scope and my eyes, especially Michael's piece about all the metrics behind the sales data. So thanks to Michael Pakko, Chief Economist and State Economic Forecaster, for his information that he shared at the very beginning. Abbi Siler, the owner of Abbi Teas and Things, thank you. Leah Lent, co-owner and store manager of Woodsworth Bookstore. Heather Smith, owner of Domestic, and Allie Weaver, who's the director of Essie Purse Museum. Also want to give another shout out to our sponsors, Right Lindsay Jennings, Frost Simmons, and the Little Rock Regional Chamber. And, you know, the Venture Center is all about supporting small businesses and, you know, no strings attached. We just want to help small businesses. And, you know, when we were planning this program out, we thought, okay, there are so many small businesses out there that, you know, we need to shine a light on. And so for the month of December, every Friday in the month of December from noon to 1, we're going to showcase up to 5 small businesses just to bring awareness. And it is the holidays. And if you got gift ideas, just bringing awareness to small businesses. So be on the lookout for that. Sign up for it. You can check out our website, our newsletter, social media. And if you have a friend or family member with a small business that wants to be recognized, feel free to have them reach out. I'll throw my email in the chat, ashley@venturecenter.co. We just want to spread the word about small business and help spread the wealth. So thank you all for being here with us today, sharing your story. We hope to see you all again soon. And with that, I will say, have a happy Friday. Thank you and goodbye.